What if I told you that the world's most valuable company, Apple, may have just made a mistake so massive it could eventually cost them $1 trillion? Think about that for a second. A single misstep, big enough to wipe out the value of entire nations' economies. For decades, Apple has been untouchable, rewriting the rules of business and technology. But now, cracks are starting to show. Could Apple's relentless drive for control and profit finally be the very thing that brings them down? Let's find out. Before revealing Apple's shocking $1 trillion mistake, let's step back and see what makes this company so powerful in the first place, and why this misstep could be catastrophic. Apple isn't just a company. It's the trillion-dollar giant whose very success makes its shocking mistakes so hard to believe. From the iPhone in your pocket to the App Store that fuels millions of apps, Apple has built an ecosystem that feels unshakable. Now think about it. Apple isn't just selling phones. It's in our music, our workouts, our banking, even our homes through devices like the Apple Watch and HomePod. For millions of people, leaving Apple's ecosystem feels almost impossible. And that's exactly the power on which they've built their empire. But even giants stumble, and right now, Apple faces a problem unlike anything in its history. Regulators, competitors, and even its own loyal partners are calling out what they believe is Apple's trillion-dollar mistake. If true, this isn't just another lawsuit or minor hiccup. It's a challenge to Apple's very business model. Today, we're diving deep into how one miscalculation could rewrite Apple's future. Apple's trillion-dollar empire rests on two pillars: its world-class hardware and its walled garden ecosystem. Now, for years, those two forces worked hand in hand to print money. But now, the very system that made Apple unstoppable may be the one that brings it down. The iPhone, iPad, and Mac generate enormous sales, but the real secret weapon is the App Store. Apple takes a hefty cut, up to 30% from nearly every transaction that happens inside its walled garden. Now, for years, this Apple tax seemed untouchable. Developers grumbled, but Apple defended it as the price of entry into the most profitable digital marketplace on Earth. But that model is now under fire like never before. In recent years, regulators from the United States, Europe, and Asia have accused Apple of anti-competitive practices. Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite, even dragged Apple into court, challenging the fairness of the App Store rules. Governments are tightening the screws, demanding Apple open its ecosystem, slash its fees, and allow outside payment systems. Now, why does this matter? Apple's services division, which includes the App Store, has become the fastest-growing part of its business. It generates tens of billions of dollars annually and underpins Apple's trillion-dollar valuation. If that revenue stream weakens, Apple's carefully crafted empire could face a financial shockwave. Investors are nervous, competitors are circling, and regulators smell blood. Tech history is full of giants who thought they were untouchable. Remember how Microsoft was dragged through years of antitrust battles in the 90s? Or how Nokia's dominance collapsed almost overnight? Apple now risks joining that list if it can't adapt fast enough. What once looked like Apple's strongest advantage may now be its greatest vulnerability. This is the heart of the trillion-dollar mistake. Betting too heavily on a system regulated in the US, Europe and China are determined to dismantle the App Store's chokehold on developers. To develop how Apple wandered into a trillion-dollar danger zone, you have to rewind the tape much more. In the iPod era, Apple learned the power of pairing great hardware with a tightly controlled store, first iTunes, then the App Store. When the iPhone exploded, that control scaled with it. One place to discover apps, one set of rules, one toll booth. Now, for a long time, it felt elegant. Safer phones, less malware, cleaner design, and a business that printed money in the background. But the same rules that made Apple feel premium also made it feel closed. The 30% cut wasn't a problem when most purchases were 99-cent downloads. Then the world shifted to subscriptions, in-app economies, and billion-dollar creator platforms. That industry standard fee suddenly looked like a tax on the future. Developers tolerated it because iPhone users spend more and because there was no real alternative inside iOS. Meanwhile, Apple doubled down on services. The logic was simple. iPhone sales spike, then slow, but services are steady, high margin, and sticky. Music, iCloud, TV, fitness, news, and the App Store at the center. That bet worked spectacularly, until it attracted the exact kind of attention Apple didn't want. Regulators, courts, and angry partners with megaphones. Epic Games pressed the red button by challenging the rules in public. Spotify questioned why Apple could favor its own services while taxing rivals. News publishers, dating apps, and smaller devs all had variations of the same complaint. Apple is both referee and player, and it keeps the whistle. Suddenly, walled gardens sounded less like curation and more like gatekeeping. Layer on privacy changes that reshape the ad economy, good for users, costly for certain businesses, and you get a picture of a company enforcing its vision with iron confidence. But confidence can look like stubbornness under the spotlight. Around the world, new rules are forcing Apple to open doors it kept shut for a decade. Alternative app stores, different payment options, fairer access to critical APIs. Each concession chips away at the toll booth. And there's a timing risk. We're entering a wave where AI, cloud gaming, and streaming blur the line between an app and the internet. If Apple loosens too slowly, developers route around it. If it loosens too fast, the App Store's economics wobble. That tension between control and openness isn't just a policy debate. It's the quiet lever that props up Apple's valuation. Pull it the wrong way, and the whole machine creaks. That mistake came crashing into the spotlight the moment regulators and courts pulled back the curtain. Every empire has the moment when the ground suddenly shifts beneath its feet. For Apple, that moment arrived not with a flashy keynote or product launch, but inside courtrooms and regulatory halls around the world. The alarms really went off when the Epic Games lawsuit pulled back the curtain. Millions watched as a video game company dared to say out loud what countless developers whispered. Apple's rules weren't just strict, they were suffocating. And for the first time, Apple had to defend its golden goose, the App Store, under oath. The ruling wasn't the slam dunk Apple wanted. Yes, they dodged the worst-case scenario, but the court agreed that Apple had crossed lines with its anti-steering rules. Developers suddenly had the right to point users toward cheaper payment options outside the App Store. Now, that may sound small, but for Apple, it was a crack in the dam. If enough developers follow that path, billions in App Store fees could vanish overnight. At the same time, Europe rolled out the Digital Markets Act, forcing Apple to open iOS to rival app stores and alternative payment systems. Imagine an iPhone where you don't need Apple's store at all. That's the nightmare scenario Cupertino never wanted. Overnight, the walls of the walled garden looked a little less secure. Investors felt it. Analysts began to whisper that Apple's services growth, once seen as unstoppable, might slow. For a company valued at over $3 trillion, even the hint of weaker services revenue isn't just bad news. It's catastrophic. We're talking about a potential trillion-dollar swing in perception because Wall Street doesn't price Apple as just a hardware maker anymore. It prices Apple as a hardware plus services juggernaut. If one half of that equation falters, a whole story collapses. This is the shocking twist. Apple's greatest innovation wasn't a device, but a business model. And now, that very model is under siege from every direction. The trillion-dollar mistake isn't just that Apple fought too hard to protect it. It's that they assumed they could never lose. Even the mightiest trillion-dollar empires can stumble, and Apple may be standing right at that edge. Apple's story has always been one of control. Control over design, over experience, over the entire ecosystem. That control turned a scrappy garage startup into the most valuable company in history. But what once looked like brilliance now looks like overreach. Regulators are breaking down walls, competitors are finding loopholes, and developers are finally fighting back. The trillion-dollar mistake isn't about one lawsuit or one law. It's about underestimating how quickly the world can change. Even the most powerful empire can tremble when it leans too heavily on a single pillar. And for Apple, that pillar is cracking. Do you think regulators and lawsuits will finally force Apple to change? Or will the company's iron grip prove unbreakable? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take.